Hey everyone, it's Kirsten. Welcome to Season 3 of the Anthropo Scene.
The scene is set. Today is literally a dream come true. And though you fight to stay collected on the outside, you are bursting at the seams. Sitting in the back of a roofless Jeep, the air blows against your face, giving a slight comfort from the intense heat, but just barely. You clutch your camera in both hands and gaze at the grasses and shrubs that rush by. The occasional stubby tree stands out on the landscape. You're watching carefully for any signs of wildlife. The driver continues along the dusty trail until in the distance you hear low grumbles and your heart is about to jump right out of your throat. You and the team approach a flooded wetland, and it's like a scene out of a nature documentary. Sitting with their heads just poking out of the water are a pod of hippos. They flick their ears around, but otherwise remain totally motionless, staying cool in the heat of the day. Some crocodiles are also sunning themselves near the far water's edge, and you hear a distant cry of a bird of prey, though you can't quite locate it. The Jeep stops and everyone gathers their gear to go collect samples for the day. You adjust your hat to make sure it's covering as much of you as possible and follow the scientists quietly. You ready your camera, hardly able to believe that this is only your first day on this incredible trip. Hello, everyone. It's me, Kirsten. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I am totally honored. And as a thank you, I'm going to do my absolute best to not answer "that's so cool" every time my guest speaker says something. Let's just say editing yesterday was a little bit embarrassing for me, and thank you for bearing with me. But anyways, off we go. Today I am here with a super special guest who is a scientist and, among many other amazing things, a hippo expert, which is super cool. So Camille, thank you so much for joining me. Could you introduce yourself to the people?
Hi, Kirsten. Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here. Such a cool introduction, by the way. You really set the scene really well. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I am a hippo specialist, I guess in parentheses, and otherwise I did a PhD in hippo behavioral ecology. I'm currently an honorary research fellow at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, in the Durban area. And I also am the founder of a tourism organization called Mvubu Safaris.
Excellent. That's great. So for everybody tuning in here, I actually had the pleasure of meeting Camille for a little interview that I was doing for Untamed Science. And we talked just a little bit here about the tour company, but I thought it would be really neat to dive into this today for the podcast. But hang on to your safari hats. We'll get to that in just a second. But if people do want to hear a little bit more about hippo research, biology, and a little bit more of like the research that Camille does, you can head over to the little YouTube interview and this article that I did on Untamed Science, and you know that will be linked in the show notes for you to go check out. Also, as a quick side note, if you hadn't ever listened to one of the previous episodes about the cocaine hippos in Colombia, do be sure to go check that out. That one's called Charismatic Megafauna, to talk about that very interesting invasive species. So, Camille, before we dive into your tours and like what responsible tourism that actually helps conservation means, I'd love to start a little bit at the beginning. How did you end up in Africa?
Yeah, I guess it's probably a story that a lot of Americans can relate to. It's a story about watching too much National Geographic and Discovery Channel and being really inspired by the people I saw on screen. And my parents were both scientists, but I didn't really have a concrete pathway to get over here. So I just did a bachelor's degree in environmental studies, and then kind of did some lab work on the side to try and infiltrate kind of the science community. And then basically I found a study abroad program called Wildland Studies that was run through Monterey State at the time. And I ended up over here for 6 weeks. I found that, oh my goodness, this is something I would love to do for the rest of my life. And then I ended up coming back out here about 2 years later. I worked some odd jobs, including 1-800-GOT-JUNK for a year, cleaning people's rubbish out and dealing with tons of black widows and stuff. And then it ended up over here and started a master's degree. Originally, I was going to be working on mongoose, and then it turned into this awesome project. I had this opportunity on a project to work with hippos, and that's kind of how it all started.
That's so cool. It's oh, I just said that's so cool again. Anyway, how interesting. It's neat to see the journey, right? Because not all of us can get this really direct path. So to understand that, sometimes there's a lot of sacrifice there, to work whatever job you can to make it happen. So
yeah,
100%.
It just, you just got to have a vision, I guess, and just keep chugging. And I think I originally sent out like 52. It's a figure that I always remember. I sent out 52 emails to professors here in South Africa, and I got one positive response. So it's just about, doing your best to be persistent where you can.
Yeah, persevere. Don't give up, in the first 45 emails. Sometimes it's 52, sometimes it's 100. You never know.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I think your story resonates, like you said, with a lot of us. Africa is like on the list for so many as a dream destination. And everyone wants to see the Africa Big Five, which I had to Google. For anybody that didn't know, that's the African elephant, lion, leopard, Cape buffalo, and rhinoceros. I don't know how the hell like giraffes and then hippos and like cheetahs aren't there, but I guess there has to be a 5 or it's not a cool number.
Well, it's actually based off the fact that they were the 5 hardest animals to hunt. Back in the day. So where a hippo, you might think, oh wow, it's quite difficult to hunt, but it just kind of sits in the water during the day. So if you have a gun, you can shoot it from the side of the river, kind of thing. But those other animals were much more difficult to hunt, and so that's how the Big Five came about.
Wow. Okay. See there, that's something that I didn't know. So something that was, the biggest, most difficult to hunt are now kind of the 5 most sought after for taking pictures of, and I mean still for some hunting too. Yeah, but what I'd like to know from you is what are some of the most underrated animals in Africa? What's something that comes to mind that is so cool that people like never think about?
That is such a good question, because a lot of everyone wants to come out here, see the Big Five, and just as much as everyone wants to see them, they can also be extremely difficult to find. And so a lot of your fun, especially as someone that's interested in wildlife and things, is going to be seeing the other animals that we run into. My personal favorite is, because my name is Camille, I love chameleons as well. I don't know if it's necessarily because of my name, but it's just a crazy reptile that's in the trees that changes colors with eyes that go different directions and a tongue that does crazy stuff. So for me, they're amazing. And so I love just generally finding reptiles. It turned into like a side passion for me over the years.
Yeah, I think the reptiles and amphibians are something that, other than like the herp nerds, like people tend to not think about until you find them and you see that they're these amazing and super resilient creatures that have been around forever, right?
Yeah, and African pythons are like insane too to find, because they're just kind of sitting there. They don't scurry off into the bush when you come across them, so they're really nice for viewing, which is cool. Yeah.
Also, I'm sure there's a ton of really cool insects. I'm dying to see, other than the Big Five, like a dung beetle just like happily rolling along a giant ball of the big number 2. That's my. That's
yeah. Interestingly, there's also a thing called the small five. It's kind of far less charismatic, but it includes the elephant shrew, the rhinoceros beetle, the buffalo weaver, which is a type of bird, leopard tortoise, and what am I missing now? Lion, an antlion, which is like this. It's like a nocturnal dragonfly kind of thing. If I don't sound stupid saying that, but yeah.
Yeah, they're Neuroptera. Their larvae are these like insane little like flat pancakes of death, and then they turn into these really cool, like you said, they look like dragonflies. They're super neat
Yeah.
invertebrates. Also, I was doing some reading into mantids for a project, and they have these giant mantids in Africa. And I mean, I know Africa's a huge continent too, and we're talking mostly about South Africa here, but yeah, there's a lot to see.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So speaking about then seeing those things, you and some other colleagues have gotten together to create, from what I can see, this really neat tour company. Can you just kind of give me the elevator pitch a little bit about what y'all are trying to do?
Yeah. So a lot of people come to Africa. Maybe if you're a first timer or you've been to Africa several times, a lot of your experience is kind of this safari experience where you're on a game drive. And it's basically like a roller coaster. I like to think about it because you've got a driver and you're going from sighting to sighting, and you're seeing these animals. Our experience is more. We try to go more in depth. So you're rather than having the game driver recite facts by scientists, we're the scientists actually doing the discoveries on the ground, and you get to be part of that experience. And knowing that the fees that you're paying also go directly towards supporting the research that you're seeing and partaking in, and then having this positive impact that you leave behind. Along the way, we're still taking people to amazing lodges. We're still going to those 5-star lodges that are very affordable in South Africa if you're coming over with dollars and euros and things. So you're not missing out, but you get to just get that little bit deeper than other folks get to go.
Right. So it's kind of like a VIP day in the life tour, a little bit more, where you're not just doing a tour that they say, if 20% of the funds go to science, you get to see the science happening on the ground.
100%. Yeah, it's this behind the scenes look, I guess. Yeah.
So neat. What is some of the research then that your team is working on that people get to partake in?
Yeah, so the exciting projects we got going on right now. So our first tours are going to be a combination of urban ecology with then going into the parks. So we start with crowned eagle research. Crowned eagles are the most powerful raptor in the world when it comes to their talons. When you look at all predators in Africa, they've actually got the longest tool, longer than their talons are longer than a lion's tooth, any other, longer than a crocodile tooth. And so we actually in Durban have the densest population of crowned eagles in the world, we believe, at this stage. It's kind of like the leopards in, I forget which city in India, but it's like this incredible high dense population that is able to survive because there's also a high density of these kind of these things called ibis, Hadida ibis,
right,
and rock hyrax. And they proliferate in the city, and so the birds are able to have a very high density of nests. We think in the region of 100 nests. Well, it's actually right about 70 nests in the kind of greater Durban area. And so that's one project you get to participate in that involves, climbing. The people aren't climbing trees, but we climb the trees every year to to put rings on the chicks, and you get to be there when we take the chick down and see it. That's just part of normal research methods. So it's nothing new, and we're not changing our methods so that tourists get to see it. It's what we do on a daily basis, and we just want to bring people in. The other projects involved, and I hope it's not intimidating, but some snakes. We've got a lot of snakes in Durban. There's a TV show that passes often on, I think, Nat Geo or something, called Snakes in the City. And we work directly with the folks kind of behind the scenes of that show. And we're doing a lot of research, or a lot of research is being done on these snakes are coming into people's homes, so we have to capture them, remove them, put them in wild areas. And then we're kind of seeing these mark recaptures, and we're getting terrific data on growth rates and the movement. Some snakes are moving from park to park in the city and stuff, so it's pretty cool. And then that really is our urban section. And then as we move into kind of the parks, the big 5 parks, which takes the majority of the time, we spend about 7 days. And the real cherry on top there is that our goal is to finance with these tourists, with these group tours, is to finance the purchase and translocation of a lion, including a GPS unit. And so with landscape change happening across the world, we're getting smaller and smaller protected areas, and we have to move animals between parks to maintain genetic diversity. And as part of that, that's kind of what we're hoping to finance, is moving animals from park to park and people getting to observe that taking place.
Right. I think this is a huge issue we always forget about, is we get these great parks, but the fragmentation, right, like breaking up these parks, ends up totally isolating these groups. And like you said, you want to move them around so that you don't get so much isolation in genetics.
Right.
And back to the eagles, I find that so interesting because in so many parts of the world, like birds of prey tend to do so poorly in urban areas, like compared to birds. So I think that's amazing that you can be right there and experiencing that.
Yeah, there's some people in this city that have lucked out, and they have a charismatic eagle nest looking into their kitchen. A nest that's like maybe 30 meters away from their window. It's kind of an undulating landscape, so you have these trees that the nests are like between 30 and 60 meters up in a tree. But then someone's house will be looking straight down into this nest, and for 180 days a year, they're watching the whole process of this chick growing up and taking its mating flights, which they're doing now. It's just incredible.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I've seen videos of people like, yeah, I have a pigeon in my window, but can you imagine a ground eagle that you can just check in on every single day? Yeah. Yeah,
it definitely makes for a great amateur photography model. You see these people buying their huge lenses just to take photos of their crowned eagle in their backyard. It's pretty cool.
Right. Well, so you have a lot of really interesting projects for people to check out, and I think it's really neat to have that contrast of like the urban wildlife and what's out in the parks, in the wilderness as well. What I'd love to talk about a little bit is kind of buzzwords a little in tourism, and especially in these kind of ecotourism sort of companies. So I noticed on your website that y'all used nature responsible travel instead of using like sustainable tourism, ecotourism. I was curious if there was a reasoning behind that, or if that's just the wording that you chose.
I think when I wrote that, so for me it's maybe it's less about avoiding the other terms and more trying to be direct. So I feel like nature kind of represents the wildlife potentially, whereas sustainable might be a term that's used in kind of environmental subjects as well. So that's why I chose that specific word, but it's not that I was necessarily avoiding the other ones.
Okay, fair enough, for sure. I just know because, sometimes you get so many of these places that are ecotourism and sustainable, and it's really hard to know, if any of that's actually happening. Um, so what does it mean then to actually support science and nature through tourism instead of just, I mean, I know a lot of these companies are like, oh, by bringing tourists, we're taking photos instead of shooting them, but what does it mean to go a little bit more than that?
Yeah. And just to go back to your previous question, I do actually, now that you mention it as a kind of a buzzword, it was kind of avoiding those because you do see those ecotourism things, and then you dig into their itinerary, and it's really just about, they're using like a certain lodge that has a certain reduced footprint or something, and then they're taking that whole tour and calling it an eco tour.
Right.
Whereas I feel like nature positive really says, like, we're leaving something behind, and it's going to be positive for nature. Remind me of the subsequent question, which was, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So how do you go? How do you actually support nature and science through tourism instead of just, like you said, going to an eco lodge or giving 5% of what you make to a conservation area?
So first of all, we are doing that first step, which is going to lodges that are eco-conscious, that work directly with communities around protected areas and around the lodges. Because a lot of the issues around human-wildlife conflict are, there's communities living around these parks, so we have to support them. And so we are using that. So we're doing the little bit that everyone else is doing. And then we're cutting out middlemen. I think in our model, we're trying to cut out as many middlemen as possible. We have a direct need as scientists, particularly scientists in the Southern Hemisphere. And we actually only have the tourism to finance the research. That's the only reason we have it. So it's to raise money for projects, particularly things like vehicle rentals, subsistence money, for accommodation, food, for the researcher to come and do the research. And then other things like I mentioned previously, to have that larger impact is to really contribute to the conservation of important wildlife by purchasing potentially as a way of doing it. And really, at the end of the day, this research won't be happening unless this company works. Really, it's going to be so we need to protect these charismatic and important wildlife species. We need to actually find a way to finance, and that's what we've hopefully done.
Right, that's awesome. And I mean, because a lot of the time too, if you're just putting land aside for these animals, it's good, but doing the research into both urban wildlife and these other animals that live in parks will help us understand a lot better how to coexist. Like you said, you're doing stuff with wildlife conflict, because it has to go so much more than that. Like just putting a fence around an area and bringing tourists in, and paying some local guides or eating at a local restaurant only goes so far. Like getting in there and doing the research to see how to make it keep working, I think is so important.
Yeah, 100%. And in light of, everyone says climate change, but it's true, like we're getting these floods, and it's just, it's impacting our river systems. It's impacting, we now have a lot of these trees that are falling due to the inundation of the soil, and these trees are falling with nets. And so, it's just to answer these questions, try and put the most modern research and technology forward to try and answer these kind of questions and hopefully helping with the management and conservation of the species going forward.
Excellent. So I don't know if you have any ideas, but I was wondering how then can people sort of sniff out these greenwashing companies that don't actually give a shit and they're just like slapping a label on there? Do you have any ideas for things to look out for?
I think if you're an uneducated when it comes to coming to Africa, having that African experience, it's probably easy to fall for those types of things. And you're not a bad person for it. You know, you're still going to have a brilliant experience. It's to go through and read about what they're doing. One thing you definitely want to avoid when you're coming out here is things like lion interactions or any sort of interaction that feels like, how is that even possible? How am I getting so close to this animal and petting it and taking photos of it? Lion walking with lions and things like that. That's not necessarily, and people might call that like eco-friendly or conservation-oriented tourism, but really it's a story far more complicated than that. And if I went into it, it'd be a sad story. So I probably won't. But yeah, just look at what people are offering and read into detail about the itinerary. How are you actually going to be going and making a positive impact in communities? How are you contributing to research? How much money is being spent towards conservation? Where are they spending this money for conservation research? There's so many NGOs out there now. Where is that money going? And I guess those are some questions you can start to ask yourself. And but a good way is always to ask a local. I think people that live here are close to wildlife. They are participating in going and seeing wildlife probably several times a year, and so they know the organizations that are, attracting international tourists that might have less of an idea of what they're getting into versus a very educated wildlife crowd, which exists here.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, it's a good place for people to start. I'm really glad that you mentioned the interactions thing because I think that's something that thankfully people are starting to come around to. You see a lot in Southeast Asia as well to avoid it. If anybody's giving you elephant rides or if you're touching tigers and getting photos, like you said, directly with these animals aren't supposed to be near us, then that's like your major red flag for sure.
Yeah.
And then just looking into a little bit, are they working with researchers? Are they working affiliated with an NGO or a university? And I'm not trying to say that as a tour organization, like you're trying to make money as well. It's a business. Like these people have to make salary. They're doing that, but I think giving back is just such an important part, especially in parts of the world with so much difficulty around land use change and making it work.
Yeah, I mean, and people are coming over with dollars, and their vacation is not that expensive, compared to say 10 days in Hawaii or something. I don't know. It's probably going to be more expensive. So that little bit, that money that you're spending could be used to make a huge impact, and just to make sure that, I mean, to actively try and make that money go further for conservation is such a noble thing to do when you're traveling here.
Right. Be a responsible consumer, right? Use that money in a way that can have impact instead of just, being a cute vacation for your Instagram.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't like those people anyway. Well, that's so good, Camille. I think that, that's a really good little peek into what y'all are doing, what they can do to be more of a responsible consumer. Something I'd love to hear is what are one of the coolest experiences you've had in the field, just to make people really want to come out and work with you guys?
What I'll mention is my first ever kind of dip into the purchase of lions and reintroducing them into parks. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but basically, I had this opportunity. It's widely regarded as the oldest reserve in Africa. It's called Susue Impolosi, and it used to be the Zulu king's hunting ground. So the Zulus are a people that live here in the KwaZulu-Natal province in South Africa. And so it's an incredible place. It's really untouched nature. And the one incredible opportunity that I had was that they were looking to finance the introduction of new male genetics into the population. They were finding that the lions were getting sick with multiple different things. What was it? It was tuberculosis. It was feline AIDS, I think, as well. And so they needed some to make the population more robust. So what we did was I was able to just call a couple friends here in California, and my friend basically put the money up for this wildlife, or for the purchase and translocation of the lions, including 2 GPS units. So typically when you introduce male lions into a new park, you do it as a coalition. You might think, oh, we take one male from there, one male from over there, and one male from here. Actually, it's the opposite. You take 3 brothers and you introduce them, because then they're just going to go through and go 3 versus 1 or whatever, take out the old blood.
Right.
And they will then reproduce with the various female groups around, and they'll have dominion over the park. And lovely end to the story is that we're now 3 generations away. So there was the lions, and there was their offspring, and then now it's the grandchildren. And they're now so powerful that they have a pride of 40 lions, which is now also becoming a problem because they need new blood again, right, to fight with these very strong lions. So it's on our radar as another project that we can contribute to in the near future. And for me, just being part of that, seeing the plane landing, watching the vet come out of the plane vomiting, as he just spent 3 hours in a plane with 3 lions cuddled up, peeing on each other. Oh my God. Him coming out the plane, and then loading the lions on the back of a bucky, which is like a pickup truck, and we're just zooming through communities. I'm just looking at people on left and right of the road, and they have no idea that we actually have lions in the back of this truck. And just putting my hand on feeling the paw of a lion is just like insane. But yeah, it was all for a good cause. When we got there, as we're going through the gate, there was like a herd of 60 buffalo, and you could just see that they were smelling a lion, but they didn't know where it was. So they do this thing where they kind of have their head up, and they're kind of looking back and backing up into each other. And then, but yeah, it was such a positive experience, and to go back and be able to tell those people that they contributed, and they still tell the story now to folks when they come over to their home. They have pictures on the wall of their lions that they purchased, and they get to tell people, hey, I did this really cool thing, and put some money towards it. And yeah, honestly, I think they would probably do it again.
Right. That's such a great start, and such a good story to see the success that you had as well. That, of course, the research went into picking lions that would work for this and getting them moved over, and then, just casually driving around with a truck full of lions, which is quite something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's really the story that inspired the whole, that along with doing the research over the years. It's just all these elements that as a tourist people are missing.
Yeah.
But I just love, and so it's trying to bring those to the people and give them this opportunity to give back while also having these incredible experiences.
Right. I think too, so many times you're like, oh, part of this money, you know, this tour goes to science, and you're like, oh, science, and you just like are picturing a really terrible stock photo of like someone in a lab coat with like a beaker of blue liquid, instead of actually experience like what that looks like.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So just for fun, I always want to ask kind of a dumb question at the end. Which African animal smells the worst?
Okay. So for me, the thing that comes up in my head first is actually a black mamba.
Oh.
My friend and a scientist that we work closely with, he's basically involved in a lot of black mamba relocations and things in Durban. And when you catch a black mamba, what it does is it actually just defecates all over you, as it's kind of, it's part of what it does when you capture it. And it's
right. I like.
Yeah. It smells like curry, but you know it's poo, so it's got this like poo curry smell to it, and so that for me is definitely a bad smell. And it's funny enough, it sticks with you, obviously. And sometimes I'll be walking along a stream or something on some like warm rocks, and I'll actually smell it because I'm like, oh my goodness, there must be a mamba that, you know, defecated around here not too long ago. Then you can actually pick it up. But yeah, it's a smell that you don't want on your hands, but and I don't think it's gonna make you hungry for curry either. Yeah.
I am so excited because that is not even close to like what I had imagined for an answer. So that is incredible. Well, yeah. So next time you're walking along, you're like, okay, is someone really bad at cooking curry, or is there black mamba shit like around here?
Exactly. Yeah. Either way, get out of there immediately.
Exactly. You're either going to end up with a stomach ache or an encounter that you might not want to.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Camille. I think, I learned a lot today in a very short amount of time. Hopefully, some people can head over and check out your website, and your Instagram is all going to be down in the show notes and tagged in Instagram as well, so people can check that out. And I'm sure if people have questions, maybe they can send you a message, just ask you a little bit more about the project.
Of course. That would be amazing. Okay. Yeah. People are welcome to message me, and thank you very much for having me. It was so much fun, just like last time.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening all the way to the end. I appreciate it, and we will see you again soon.
Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end of the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you head to the show notes, check out the links of things I might have mentioned in the show, go follow us on social media, and yes, do @ me. I'd love to hear from you, what you think, if you want to be a guest with me, if you have suggestions for future episodes, that would be great. Other than that, we do have a Patreon link as well below if you're feeling like helping support the show, and I can't wait to see you around for next episode. Thanks, bye.